Okay, everyone. It looks like everyone is finishing up on the first one. If I could grab everyone's attention and take a look at the second one. Okay, this will be the second assignment. So I'm presuming that your code for that first assignment today will look something like this, in which we have our while loops right here. And we have the calc my mortgage as an example as a separate method. So how many methods now do we see here? How many methods are here now?
Two.
Yes, we have the the main method, and the main method is referencing the second method right here. The second method is right here. So are there any more opportunities for improvement, do you think?
Could you take all the while loops and make them each their own function?
Well, yeah, yes and no. What you could do is I'm in these directions here. It first asks you to please copy and paste this into, copy and paste this into your IDE, and make sure it has it's correct. Make sure it has fitness, as they say. Make sure it's correct. And then we can examine the top method right here, and we can ask ourselves, how many lines of code are between here and here, right? And is there a way we can reduce the code, such as removing the redundant while loops? And the first thing is to identify the redundant while loops. So, for example, as we went over before, while here we have while true, it asks the user to enter the principal. And so long as the principal that is entered is adherent to this condition, it will break. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody has a question. Sure. Yes, you can submit. Anyways, this is not, and again, I'm not grading on how correct it is. I'm just grading you on the attempt. Anyways, it says please enter a value between 1,000 and 1,000,000. So as long as the condition is satisfied here, it breaks out of this while loop. Okay, but if the condition is not satisfied, then it will keep asking for a number between 1,000 and 1,000,000. And I went over this the other day. Why would we want to limit it to having to borrow at least 1,000? Because if I was a bank, I would set a minimal limit, just because you have to make a certain amount of money on the transaction, because there are minimal costs associated with every transaction. Anyways, same thing. We have it for principal. Same thing for annual interest rate and for period. And it just seems like they're going through the same while loop. So, and then of course we had already figured out the. Hold on. We had already figured out the fact that we can, remove the mortgage and put that in its own method right here. Okay. So we examine in that first method how many lines of code are there, and identifying the redundant while loops, and then create a generic data acceptor value checker right here, and then independently check the code, which independently checks the code. So instead of referencing, this condition every single time, create a single method, name it something like read number, and the parameters within read number are the prompt itself, the min and the max, and then you have return value. Here's an example. We can go to the principal while loop, right? And here it is for the before, and we recognize this code. However, let's create our own checker by relying on a separate read number method. So we create this read number method here, and we can say read number principal min is 1,000, max is 1,000,000, and noting the parameters and arguments. Note this is min, so this would be a reference to our parameter right here, min, right here. Right here, string double min, double max right here. Okay, and that's the max. So why do we not have to define for the principal type as an int? Okay, this principal right here. Notice that we do not have to define it as an int. Now, why do you think we do not have to define this principal as an int? Or why do you think we don't have to define the type of principal? And that is because if you take a look at the code all the way up here, we already have int principal equals 0, so we don't have to redefine it so long as it's within the same scope. Okay. However, we do have to cast it as an int. Now, why is that? Why does principal, which has the type of int as defined prior, why are we casting read number as an int? That is because when we created our method called read number, the return type is a double. And that is to compensate for the fact that this is a generic read number method. So it's going to have to facilitate these different data types. Principal is an int, but annual percentage rate, that is a float right here, and years is a byte. So for principal, okay, we're going to have to cast it as an int because read number was defined as a float or as a double, Okay, now we're going to have to do the same thing for annual interest rate and years for bytes. Okay, so what you're going to wind up with when we're done with this is you're going to enable, you're going to make sure that MortCalc is shrunken. You're not going to touch Calc My Mortgage. That's already taken care of. But all you're doing here is you're removing the redundant while loops. And instead of doing, you're going to centralize all the while loops into one read number method. Okay, so there's one while loop, and you're going to define in broad strokes what the min and max are. And then what you're going to do is you're going to define each question here in terms of its data type. Okay, same thing as here. Basically, you're going to do this thing you did for the principal. You're just going to do that over and over for each redundant while loop. So we've already done principal. Now you're going to do interest rate and then period in years. So what that will do, that will greatly reduce the lines of code in the mortgage calculator method. Okay, and then that is what you're going to be handing in. That will be due, in a few days. Okay?